Look at this beautiful thing. Look at this bad boy. We're talking about it on the PHLY Eagles podcast with the author himself in the house, Zach Berman, coming up next. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the PHLY Eagles podcast presented by Bet365. Download the Bet365 app and use code PHLY365 when you sign up. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Welcome to the show today, a bye week Wednesday. Bo Wulf, Zach Berman, and we are here, Zach, to talk about the book. I'm very excited. How you doing?
I'm grateful. Honestly, I appreciate you having this idea and being willing to do it. The promotion of a book is really an awkward thing, right? You have to do it, right? You have to promote.
You're going to sell those bad boys. Got copies to move.
But you don't want to, A, be like overexposed, and B, we do a show every day. There's a lot of Eagles things to talk about. So I appreciate you being willing to discuss it here because I am proud of this and anxious for how it's received. And I appreciate so far the notes from readers, but then listeners, viewers of the show who are reaching out and tell me about particular chapters or anecdotes they enjoy.
Now, I do have to start the show today with one thing unrelated to the book, and that is an apology related to swooper sorecasting.
Yeah, I got one of them right. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we did misjudge the Jalen Hurts threw more touchdowns and interceptions yesterday. So while you did drop the ball on the selfie from the bachelor party, it was a three-way tie this week. No blood.
My father-in-law is a great person. You've met him. Not an objective source, though, with this. He thinks I was right. And I said to him, I was like, you know what? I was wrong. The letter of the law. I was like, my shortcoming in swooper is not listening to the full instructions or the full item. So I'm frustrated because that was such an easy thing, right? All I had to do.
It's supposed to be.
And I should have just taken a selfie of myself instead of sending a picture of Nick. I was standing there the first night we were there, and Nick's there, and I'm like, let's just get this out of the way. I don't have to take photos the rest of the weekend until the game. And then I thought I was in the clear, and I texted you, "Here's my swooper point," and I thought that was sufficient enough.
You said four. Yeah, you said four swooper. And I hearted it.
Yes, exactly. So I thought that was sufficient. But I will. Okay. I will take it and learn from it.
All right. Let's get to the business at hand. First of all, congratulations.
Thank you, Bo.
This is a remarkable undertaking.
And you were there, like you saw me pulling my hair out.
In the slow time.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
I mean, you really dragged yourself through the mud, but you came out on the other side. The breadth of this book is great.
Thank you.
And wide, and the insight is deep.
I appreciate that.
Let's start with a couple things that are relevant to the moment. Okay, and I do want to start with Jalen Hurts.
Yes,
because you wrote when did you write the Jalen Hurts chapter?
So I had it the outline for it throughout last season. So just to give people a sense of my deadline. My deadline last year was before the season, okay? I was able to stretch that to mid-October. I was going through the job change. There was a lot going on. So I was able to stretch that until like mid-October last year is when I submitted everything except two chapters, Sirianni and Hurts. But Sirianni and Hurts, they had everything laid out. So it had to be within a set board length.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And then so I had it outlined, and I was just going to kind of update if something happened dramatically late in the season, after the season, that kind of thing. So for all intents and purposes, it was all the the material for it was during the season, and then the writing was directly after the season on that.
Okay. Now, and for people who are unaware, which would surprise me at this point, but the book is a collection of essays about the executives, the head coaches, the quarterbacks, the big players over the past 25 years, and the moments as well. And so for Jalen Hurts, this is what I want to ask you about, and it's because the scope of the book is so long, but we on this show we do a show every single day. It is easy to get caught up in the moment, and like you don't notice the big changes as they're happening, right? And so, as little a time as 2-3 years ago, how much has changed about the way that we view Jalen Hurts? And there's a scene that you have, and it's the quote from Jalen from the 2021 season when Nick is coaching him hard in that game. And in the quote that Jalen says on the podium after the game is, "In high school, I lived with the guy that was chewing me out," obviously referring to being a coach's son. "I made it clear to Nick all year, you can get on me a little bit. So after the fumble, he came up to me and said what he had to say. Then later on in the game, he comes back and jokes with me and says, 'I guess I'm just going to start coaching you like your dad coached you.' So it was a funny moment. Whatever he said worked." Boy, has the relationship with Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni changed in the last 3 years. Like, it's wild to think. Jalen would never say that now.
No, it's a great point, and I'm glad you brought that up. We were not on that call with Nick on Monday because our show overlapped, but there was a great exchange with Jeff McClain from the Inquirer about holding Jalen accountable. And Nick basically said in there, "I do it behind the scenes, but I would never do it publicly." And if I was on the call, I want to follow up, and I will next week. Probably on Friday, because Friday you kind of do some more of the philosophical questions. Is why not, right?
Because you've done it in the past.
Yeah, and Jalen's welcomed this, but like there really does seem to be walking on eggshells around Jalen. I said in the show on Monday, it reminds me of like the end of Carson, that they were so scared of his psyche, and it shouldn't be the way Jalen's wired. And by the way, there's a story I'm working on now that's going to appear early next week, and Jalen's talking about a particular coach on the staff. And one thing that Jalen said to me was, he reminds me of the way my dad coached me, which is interesting because I don't know if he wants Nick.
Maybe Clint Hurt, then I would imagine.
It was not, it's not the way that Nick is coaching him now.
Yeah, it's interesting how quickly things change, and there are obviously many moments along the Eagles' timeline over the past 25 years when things have changed quickly. But it's hard to get over how quickly things have changed. And like, one thing that comes up in this book is like the echoes of history. And it does, to me right now, feel like this team is going the way of, the 2019, 2020 Eagles, right? Like, it feels like it's all happening again.
And there's like a fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice.
Yeah.
Or is it the other way around? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me 3 times. Yeah, just shame. Is that the expression? Okay. I don't want to be like...
I think it's shame. Shame.
Yeah, but...
That could be our opportunity for nudity, actually.
It's the same life cycle of you pay the quarterback, and then the quarterback's emboldened, and then you get to a point where, because of the quarterback's role in the organization, he becomes more important than anybody else. And I thought that
a lot of activity going on outside today.
Yeah, I thought that was a lesson that they might have learned from the Carson experience. But I am seeing this with Jalen, and I don't want to use the term disappointing because I don't want to be personally invested in it. But having covered it, one of the things is that you try to get a read on somebody. And the thing that always jumped out to me about Jalen was like the mental toughness. The thing you read there is that I did not write about Carson that way. Like, there was a certain fragility to Carson. Yeah. Not just physically, but emotionally, like throughout. And I remember him talking about the Foles thing and like the vulnerability that he exposed to that. Jalen, there's always been. It's like the passage you read in that game. That game's vivid in my mind. It was the game that got postponed because of COVID. Remember that? Or
the Garrett Gilbert game.
Yes. And that was all the mental toughness. And the thing you kept hearing is the way he dealt with the Alabama situation, which I chronicled in the book, because that was something that Jeffrey Lurie and other people brought up to me was was like you saw in Alabama the way he dealt with this. I don't know why you can't push back. I mean, that
and the other thing that you have in that section, which was such a common talking point in like 2022, was, listen, I don't know what Jalen's ceiling is, but I know that he is wired to get to whatever that ceiling is. Like, he will maximize his potential. Nobody's talking about Jalen like that anymore.
No, and a lot of it, I don't want to conflate it with getting paid, because who knows what, there's so many variables. But just that's kind of the timeline, is that there is a contract, and that contract sometimes.
And of course, what they said about him when they paid him, like, well, he's the most mature 25-year-old we've ever seen.
Exactly. And I'm not saying that it emboldens you, but there was the line in the Tim McManus story that he tried to earn that contract with every throw. But also it becomes, there's a great responsibility. Take the money aside, just kind of the status that comes with that. You're that guy in the franchise. You're that guy in the league.
Okay, let's talk about Jeffrey Lurie, who I think is the main character of the book, I guess you could say, right? Because this is the arc of his ownership. Yeah. And that chapter in particular is very in depth, and kudos to you. You got a nice sit down with the man to reflect on his time.
For full disclosure, it was Zoom sessions because he was out of town.
Yeah, but were you both sitting?
Yeah, that's true.
Okay,
yeah,
so
I was sitting.
A virtual
I was sitting
sit
in
down,
the same seat where I do my my podcast, right?
And many other things.
And
we have a Blue Chew read coming up, so
yeah, we had multiple conversations. We spoke forward, and I'm grateful for his time and perspective for this.
So the one question that I have about this season in particular is the way that he talks about head coaches that you have talked about for a while. I don't care that the person hasn't been interviewed by another franchise, right? Like, we can do the identification. I was thinking about how much that stands in contrast to the way they go about filling coordinator positions this offseason, right? Vic Fangio and Kellen Moore, like we talked in the spring, in February, about, like, you know what, maybe you want to chase the floor with Vic Fangio, but where is the interviewing of up and coming minds on offense? Your GJ Kinneys or whoever, your Brian Grubbs. No, it's just sort of looking for retreads like Cliff Kingsbury and Kellen Moore. And we've sort of seen this in many other ways, right? Like, oh, let's go find someone to give us the Kyle Shanahan influence with Rich Scangarello, right? And there's also player acquisition stuff like this, where it's let's go find some first round picks. Why do you think that when it comes to head coaches, Jeffrey is willing to think a little bit more outside of the box than he is in filling sort of lieutenant positions?
Yeah, that's another good question. And as you're saying it, what comes to mind is a sentiment that Jeffrey shared, which was what you need in a coach at a given time is different each time, right?
I think about this a lot with Nick right now.
Yeah.
Go
ahead. And so if we spin this forward, if the Eagles do have a coaching change, like, that's something that would be very relevant, is what Jeffrey's looking for at that particular time. When Jeffrey hired Chip, he was looking for innovation. He was, they had the same system for 14 years, or the same coach, same voice for 14 years. He was looking for a strong, innovative voice. He was looking for something totally different, right? When they fired Chip, famously, he was looking for the emotional intelligence. I think he was looking for someone who had that type of connection in the locker room. The former player part of it really stood out. The ability to understand players, right? When he hired Nick, the big emphasis wasn't on the schematic part. It was more on, like, the teaching part.
Yes.
And he thought that's what the team needed at that particular point. He
brings in a bunch of staff of young coaches, all of these guys. Like, it's all about, this is the beginning of a new life cycle for this team. We got to teach these guys. That's not where they are now.
Yeah. And so if I had to project, and again, like, I have a piece on allphly.com where it's kind of an extension of some of the thoughts we had the past 2 days. And at the end, I outline if we are overreacting, and I point to the next 4 opponents are 3-13, right? Like, what the upcoming schedule. There's a chance Nick is here. The Eagles win a playoff game, he keeps his job. But if the Eagles continue on this trajectory, they'll have a coaching change. Right? We outlined that going into the year. Jeffrey's not going to run this back after a middling season. And so if they were to make a change after the season, I think what he would look for is exactly what you're outlining, like the schematic chops. I think he would look for someone who gives them a schematic advantage every week. I think that would be the big talking point, and that's so you look at the offensive, gurus, if you will, or maybe a defensive coach like that. But I really think what he would be looking for is the schematic advantage on a week-to-week basis.
Okay, I think that makes sense. All right, we're going to talk about Jeffrey and like the Joe Banner partnership in a minute. But first, a word from our sponsor. Zach, what do you think is the horniest moment of your book?
I don't think my book is a particularly horny book. I'll be honest with you. But here, how about this? Is when they drafted someone from the Horned Frogs, TCU. Twice actually.
Way to get away from it. That's
good. Jalen Reagor and Halapoulivaati Vaitai from the Horned Frogs. So I am going to frame it like that.
All right. So when the PHLY, the All City bumper comes up and you see a picture of Halapoulivaati Vaitai holding the Super Bowl trophy, maybe you go from 6 to midnight. But if you don't, you might need some help. And that's where Blue Chew comes in. Blue Chew, it's going to get you ready for the big moment. We talk about the moments that are never ordinary. This is the big moment. Blue Chew is an online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but at a fraction of the cost and in a chewable form. You can take them anytime, day or night, so you can plan ahead or be ready whenever an opportunity arises. The best part, it's all done online. That means no visit to the doctor's office, no awkward conversations, and no waiting in line at the pharmacy. You could be missing out on the best sex of your life. Well, that's why Blue Chew is here to help you out. And we've got a special deal for our listeners. Try Blue Chew free when you use our promo code ALLCITY at checkout. Just pay $5 shipping. That's bluechew.com, BLUECHEW.com. Promo code ALLCITY, all one word, to receive your first month free. Visit bluechew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring this podcast.
If you look in this book, you will find Shady and you will find Ray.
Okay. Who's the Ray?
Well, there's a Ray Rose reference and a Ray Didinger,
Rose, okay.
and Ray Didinger's in the sources.
So there are two Rays.
Yes.
Oh, nice.
So there's a Shady and there's a Rays, and of course, if you are reading this outside, you might want to wear Shady Rays, because get ready for the season ahead or the season we're in with quality shades built to last. Our friends at Shady Rays have you covered with premium polarized shades that won't break the bank. Shady Rays is an independent sunglass company offering a world-class product rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. Their shades have durable frames and crystal clear optics, making them the perfect choice for all outdoor adventures. They have hundreds of options to choose from, so you're bound to find the perfect pair to match your style. They probably have a style in your favorite team's colors. I can give a personal endorsement of Shady Rays because in my car, I have a pair of Shady Rays that are my car sunglasses, if you will, right? If your shades ever go missing, if I lose them, and take an unexpected hit, don't sweat it. They have the most insane protection all eyewear. Every pair is backed by lost or broken replacements. And if you don't love your shades, exchange them for a new pair or return worry-free within 30 days. Exclusively for our listeners, Shady Rays is giving out their best deal of the season. Head to shadyrays.com and use code PHLY for 35% off polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself. The shades rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people.
All right. Jeffrey Lurie, continuing on the owner. We think of Jeffrey as a particularly invested owner, right? Somebody who is involved in the important decisions.
Yeah.
Was that always the case?
Good question. Yeah, I think that when Joe Banner was here, there was more of a layer in between, right? Joe was the president and as the president, he dealt with the football side and the business side. And then there was obviously a head coach who had Andy Reid, who was very, probably as powerful a coach as there was in the league, in addition to Belichick. And you had GMs too. You had Tom Heckert. Well, first you had Tom Modrak, then you had Tom Heckert, then you had Howie Roseman. So there were a lot more layers then, I think. And then I really do think post-2012, when Joe departed, and it removed that layer.
The organization, not this mortal coil.
Yes. I spoke to Joe for the book. He did not depart. Yeah, I appreciate Joe's time and insight for this book. And then certainly, and it's chronicled in here, I think following Chip, Jeffrey was more involved, more around. I think they kind of have the pulse of it. So I think that has evolved over the years, but he's always been the type of owner, like he's at every game. He's lived here. That was an important thing. The Eagles weren't the first team he was interested in buying, but the other teams he was looking at, he was committed to living wherever he went. So his children were raised here, right? So he's been around, right? And so I think, and he was always as you and I and Sheil chronicled in a story we did. He's always kind of viewed himself as a draft. He's always been interested in the draft, so that's a time that he's particularly interested in. And he I went through in our conversations a lot of different players, and he would give personal memories and anecdotes and stories on different players. Like I recall when I was talking about Jeremiah Trotter, and he was telling me exactly like what the draft room was like when they drafted Jeremiah Trotter, and I think it was Willie Shaw was the coach. No, Emmett Thomas was the coach with Brian Dawkins. I think Willie Shaw was the coach who really liked Trotter. I have to look that back up. But yeah, he would tell me, like I remember specific moments that he would reference to that. So I think he's more involved post Chip, but there were more layers early on.
That Joe during the early 2000s was like Jeffrey's proxy? Or was Joe doing things that Joe wanted to do and Jeffrey was just sort of giving him free rein?
Well, I mean, probably a little bit of both. Like it was always kind of viewed like Joe and Jeffrey, right? Mm-hmm. Or Jeffrey and Joe. They were childhood friends, and early on, they were kind of paired together, and there were people in the league who would mock them, honestly. And some of the stuff they were doing early on was mocked, was ridiculed. They were kind of viewed as a pair. And then I that over the years that did kind of change. And Joe would tell you, he helped develop Don Smolensky, he helped develop Howie Roseman, right? And so there was I think there was an organizational shift in the late 2000s, but early on it was really Joe was very influential.
How would you say Howie and Joe are different?
Good question. And I have to give this kind of disclosure here is that I've covered just about all of Howie's time.
Sure.
I didn't cover Joe's time. And Joe, a lot of it was talking to people for this book and talking to Joe for this book, and then reading a ton. And you talk to guys who covered the team, men and women who have covered the team, and they all have Joe's stories, right? But I would say Howie, from an interpersonal perspective, from a visit, I think Howie was probably more. I think Howie tried initially, and then certainly in his return. To have some of those interpersonal relationships, to work on that, although that was a problem early on in Howie's tenure, but also
in the building, or with the players.
Yeah, with the players.
With the players.
With the players. Like it was very much Andy was the good guy.
Yes.
Joe was the bad guy.
Right.
And Howie will tell you like there's a connection that he has to these guys, and Jason Kelce. The way he drafted Jason Kelce, and Brandon Graham was his first draft pick. He would tell you that. Joe, I think one of Joe's regrets was kind of the way the Brian Dawkins situation was put on him, and I think Howie with the players, the interpersonal relationship with the players, that dynamic there, Howie was much more. I don't want to say pro player, but had those relationships with the players.
And I think Howie has admitted that.
Yeah.
That one of his failings is too strong of a word, but one of his weaknesses is an attachment to the players who have been here. And I think that has come back to bite him a few times. But I think he probably overlearned the lesson from Dawkins and the acrimony of that departure.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely
right. Okay. Who do you think, if you had to say someone who like doesn't get enough credit for the arc of the Eagles' general success over the past 25 years, does anybody stand out?
Well, I think Joe's misunderstood in this market because I think a lot of what Howie does now and the team does now, they were doing then. And, you know, the Eagles get a lot of credits for like trades and the way they structured contracts. They were on the cutting edge of that pretty early on. And I think, I think Joe probably got, it was like a caricature at times. And so I think for the infrastructure they have, he deserves a lot of credit. But I really think Andy gets a lot of, but Andy and Donovan were so significant in this. I think John Runyon symbolically signing with the Eagles was significant. When you talk to people early on, when you talk to Jeffrey, for instance, he'll tell you how important the practice facility was and the stadium was. And you know, you saw this. I think early on in your time covering the team was still when free agents were taking visits. Is that right? Like you don't see that anymore, free agent visits.
Right. But
that used to be a thing, and the practice facility really mattered. Right. This was before every team had these sparkling practice facilities, and at the time the Eagles weren't considered really a destination per se. A veteran stadium was a bad facility. You know, they move into NovaCare, but I think John Runyon's signing symbolically was really important for them.
It's a good one. Do you think that the pride in the facility will lead to bigger changes down the road?
Well, it's not sparkly new anymore. That's for sure.
What I mean.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think one thing that they take, at least in the practice, they take pride in the fact that it's in the city, right? Frankly, there might be some players who would prefer if it weren't in the city. Sorry, that was a city wage tax line.
Okay.
But you know, like the Sixers and the Flyers are across the bridge. Anyways, sorry, but yeah, you're kind of landlocked at times, or you don't have the space that you would if it's a suburban facility. Or if it's a facility outside of the city limits. But I am curious to see. I think there are Jeffrey. When you and I were in Florida for the owners' meetings, it was very cryptic when he kind of talked about the amount of time they had left on the lease. I'm curious to see what happens with the stadium, but it would surprise me if they moved out of Philly.
Are you willing to share what Jeffrey said was his biggest regret?
Yeah, there were two, I would say. You know, there were a few things, but two that I highlighted in the book that really jump out. First is that he wished he could have made it work, that there was a way that they could have made it work with Andy at the end. In 2012, look, there's a lot that went on in Andy's family life, right? He lost his son tragically, that I think complicated that situation. You were there, you lived it, that it was... At the end, I mean that was my first year covering the team, so I'll defer to you. It seemed they were ready for a change, and it seemed Andy was ready for a change.
I think that was the best thing for both parties. It's hard. If I was Jeffrey, I wouldn't regret that decision. It's just like you're lamenting that had to be the course of action.
Because I do think, and even now, like I think Jeffrey has a genuine fondness for Andy.
Yeah, he's the best coach in football.
Yeah,
right. I mean, it's hard to divorce the Patrick Mahomes of it, but
and then I
like the framing of the Brian Westbrook chapter, where Andy basically created the modern NFL running back.
Yeah, and that came from Brian. Like Brian told me, Brian gave the anecdote of how his kids look at him and Eddie George, and they're like, "How do you guys play the same position?" But then Jeffrey's other regret was that he didn't identify what was happening with Chip sooner. And because there was stuff behind the scenes that, I mean, I think Jeffrey would say he wasn't totally clued in on how bad it had gotten.
And even that, I wouldn't hold against Jeffrey because, I mean, he gave him the third year, but kept Howie for a reason, and knew that this was a possibility, and then he pulled the trigger when he did. Like I don't know.
Yeah, but
I don't think he handled that wrong.
I mean, there was collateral damage in the sense of, and look, maybe it turned out to be the best thing for the organization in a certain respect, but I don't think Jeffrey wanted to move on from LeSean McCoy.
Yeah.
That offseason. I mean, there were some other moves there that, I don't think Jeffrey. I think it was very chip driven.
Okay, I think that's fair. The Nick Foles chapter, I think, is a fun one.
Thank you.
Because that is one where, I mean, you were there for the full arc of it, right? And it was funny reading it because it was after Nick's retirement press conference the other day. And it's like everything that Nick talked about in the retirement press conference is just already in the book chapter.
Well, that's a good sign.
You already had it all covered.
That's a good sign. Yeah.
I thought that was good.
Thank you. Yeah. And Nick is, of all the players that I've covered, I think I said this on the show when he retired, but I know I said this in private conversations. Like I felt a certain connection with Nick because he was literally the first rookie that I met that year. I remember introducing myself after practice. He was wearing glasses outside. I said this on the show, right? Okay.
I don't remember the glasses part.
Okay, yeah. And then I introduced myself to him, and then we got married around the same time. I know we had kids at the same time. Like Nick, throughout 2017, was like always asking about my son, and so we kind of. Look, I was learning my way on the job when he was learning his way on the job. I thought I was better 5 years in.
I thought you were better than him.
No. When I thought I was better at my job when he came back.
Okay.
And I think he had a greater appreciation for the market and the media when he came back. I felt strong about the Foles chapter, and there were conversations that I had with Foles over the years that I thought like were primary source material. So it's actually that's one of the nicer things you can say to me is that chapter that he hit on that in the retirement speech because
it was very funny.
Yeah, because
he mentions the fly fishing trip with his brother-in-law, and it's like in the second paragraph.
That really means a lot, and I'm gonna send Nick a book, and I appreciate that. I hope he feels the same way.
So along those lines, what was the difficulty for you of writing about the people who you didn't cover?
Oh, yeah. It's because, great question. And I saw this in my first book. That sounds like a pompous thing to say.
I don't think so.
I think people remember, and this was also the challenge, by the way, in the Joe and the Jeffrey chapter, and I have a lot of empathy sometimes for like people writing history type books because people always sanitize their memories of things, and like you hear it too. I use a lot of material in this from people's retirement press conferences, and things like that, and conversations I had with them when they retired. And I find that the stuff in the moment to be so. I bring up the first book because I found the material I had like as it happened in 2017 to be much more authentic.
Sure.
Than talking to people after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you remember the way things happened, it's kind of like your sanitized version. It's like if I tell the story of how I met my wife, right? Like it's you tell it so many times and you add like a wrinkle here and wrinkle there for dramatic effect, perhaps, that is it like totally what it was when you first met, right? And so the challenge is I wasn't there. And so I relied a lot. I did, the source list in this book outside of the people I talked to. I did a lot of research. I read, 10, 11 books, including Anthony's book, by the way. I'm not just saying that because I work with him here. Anthony's book on 2004, Sunday Pilgrimage, was awesome. He was embedded with the team. He had great stuff there. That was really helpful for the Andy. Actually, the Andy chapter started with Andy's foreword from that book.
Which was also in Anthony's
yes, exactly.
piece for
PHLY.com.
our preview this year, yeah.
But I think the challenge with those chapters was that the way people remember things sometimes are maybe a little different than it happened in the moment.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense. Now, you were here as a kid, right, following those teams. So there's a different perspective, I imagine, right?
Absolutely. And one of the cool things for this book is, I say this a lot, like we become desensitized in this job, but we don't become dehumanized. Like I'm not not a fan of the team right now. Like I cover the team. My journalistic integrity is paramount to me. But I can't, like, Julia went to high school with me. Julia can tell you what I was like in high school, in middle school.
Julia?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had a Donovan McNabb jersey, right? I'm not gonna I'm not gonna pretend that this didn't exist. Like I remember, the first game of this era in 1999. I was there with my grandfather, who I dedicated the book to.
I want to ask you about that, but go ahead.
Yeah. And I remember I was at Pete Vernon's house. My friend Julia. I'm not sorry, Julia. Our friend Pete. I was at his house with a few other guys.
Smartest guy you know.
Smartest guy I know, Pete. He'll be hopefully listening or watching, and I mean that. Although Alex Kaplan might be offended. Alex Kaplan's up there as well.
Now, do you? I take it as offense that you're not even thinking that I might be offended.
Pete's brilliant. Pete's brilliant.
I'm not saying I should be number one. I just you could at least throw me a bone that I could be offended by it.
I was at Pete's house for 4th and 26. I remember watching the pickle juice game. And I can kind of track a lot. So I have a chapter here on the miracle at the New Meadowlands. I talked to Deshaun, but I covered that game as the New York Giants beat writer. I talked to Matt Dodge after that game. There was stuff that I covered here, or that I wrote about. I remember the last, that great day in Eagles history, the end of the 2008 season, when all those things had to happen, and they destroyed Dallas
44-6.
Yeah, I was covering the Orange Bowl, Virginia Tech versus Cincinnati, which interestingly, Jason Kelce was the starting guard on that Cincinnati team.
Your boy, Mr. Family.
Yeah, Connor Barwin was the edge rusher. But I remember watching that game in the Fort Lauderdale Marriott. And so anyway, it was cool as I wrote this, not to inject myself in it, but
there's some eyes in there though.
Yeah, you can kind of trace a lot of your personal memory. Certainly, the evolution of my career, through a lot of this period. I'm 38. This period covers a 25-year period, so it starts when I'm 13 years old. Anyone watching this can tell you that they were, when you were 13 years old, that's like a very formative period for you as a sports fan, right?
Sure.
And
a pubescent young man.
I mean, no
blue chew necessary.
No blue chew necessary. So as 13, a lot of the times before my 13 years covering the team, I observed this from either the fan perspective or covering it. I was in Washington at the Washington Post from the then Washington, what the Washington football team's name was then, from their perspective as well.
Well, and I think that's part of why what I like about this book, Zach, is that it is, and I hope this is okay with you. I think of this book less as the Eagles and more about Zach Berman's Eagles.
Interesting.
I think this is very much a Zach book.
I'm curious. How so?
Well, I think for instance, the Foles stuff. This is the thing. This is what you were the closest to.
Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah.
Right. And maybe it's just because I'm your friend and I'm reading the book that you wrote, but I'm viewing this book through this is Zach's viewpoint of the last 25 years of Eagles history.
Well, you are, because I've said this on the show. And I wrote this in the epilogue. Part of my regret is what had to be left out, right? And so you leave out Asante Samuel. You leave out Trent Cole. I didn't cover Asante Samuel,
right?
And in conversations with you, I obviously watched him and know him, but I probably didn't fully appreciate how good he was during that period of time. Trent Cole, I covered the end of Trent Cole's time. I covered the beginning of Trent Cole's time. But Trent Cole is one of the most underrated Eagles during this period. There's a chapter on Brandon Brooks in here. There's not a chapter on Trent Cole. You can probably argue that I leaned more into the 2017 team, A, because they won the Super Bowl, but B, because I was there. So it's the book's 330 pages or so.
Flex.
It's not going to be a 500, 600 page book.
Sure.
And I had to write it within a period of time. And it was, so I had a deadline I had to hit. And the thing they emphasized to me is this is a curated history. It's not an encyclopedia. Because a matter of fact, to give you behind the scenes, when I was on the call with the publishing company about this, and they pitched this to me. And you guys all, if you're watching, the bookshelf I have behind me, and I turn around and I pull Ray Didinger's book out, and I show them Ray Didinger's book, and I say, it's all in here,
right?
And they were like, no, this is gonna be different. Like, this is gonna be essays that are, it's not in encyclopedia. So I leaned into the material that I had. The richest material on A, but
there's a lot of primary source material that you said.
And then I wanted to be a good cross section too of, like, I wanted Jeremiah Trotter in there so I can have a linebacker. I didn't want to just, I wanted to have different types of positions covered. I should have had a chapter on Hugh Douglas in here. That I should have had a chapter on.
I mean, you got to draw the line somewhere.
I should have had a chapter on Troy Vincent, Bobby Taylor. Like, that was significant. But I made sure all of those guys were mentioned in the book. The one that I didn't do enough justice on was Asante Samuel. And to your point, the period of time when I was least connected to the Eagles was
right, because you were an adult covering a different team.
Yeah, and was 2008 to 2012 when I was at the Washington Post and then the Star Ledger, because my life at the time was the University of Virginia, Virginia Tech, and then the New York Giants. And I would watch Eagles games. But I did not have the day-to-day connection to it that's the period when Asante was at his best.
But that's okay. This is your book.
Yeah, but still, I wrote in the epilogue there should have been more on Asante in there. Yeah. And I saw your tweet last week about Asante as a Hall of Famer. If Asante makes the Hall of Fame, I will. I hope for his sake he makes it. But if I didn't have a chapter on a Hall of Famer, that'd be a problem.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it does not seem like he's going to make it.
We'll see.
My case on Asante is the most important thing a defensive player and especially a cornerback can do is take the ball away, and he did that better than anybody in his era by a long shot.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah.
Well said.
Okay. We have more conversation to get to. Before another word from our friends. Bet365 has 90 million users worldwide, and they live stream over 780,000 events each year with early payout offers across the NBA, NFL, NHL, and MLB. Bet365 pioneered live in-game betting, and today they offer the widest range of games and markets available for live in-game betting across 78 sports. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Use the code PHLY365 to sign up, deposit $10, and place a bet for $5 to get $200 in bonus bets. Bonus bets can be used on the spread, totals, player props, futures, and more. And guess what? I mean, it's baseball playoff season, and there's early payout offers in Major League Baseball. If you're a winner, if your team goes 5 runs ahead, you just get the money. That's it. With an instant payout on straight bets and parlay selections marked as winners, download the app and use code PHLY365 when you sign up. Download the Bet365 app. Use code PHLY365 when you sign up to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary. At Bet365 must be 21 or older and physically located in Pennsylvania. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER.
When I saw yesterday, my friend Matt Gelb tweeted out the Phillies game times for this weekend. The first thing I did was pull out my phone and open up Game Time. Okay, and I did that because look, these
how's
games,
it looking?
They're expensive right now. The good thing about Game Time, though, I'm glad you said that, is you can wait until closer to first pitch.
Yeah.
Right, because they have these great last minute deals, and if I'm able to pull it off to take Reid this weekend, I will be using Game Time, because Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. It filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And I can tell you the only way I'm going to a game this weekend is with incredible deals. Okay. Then they have super deals, and the great thing about super deals is it's curated like the history of this book, and the curated deals make it easier to find the best price on great seats. The super deal seat views before you buy, lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, which I don't anticipate an event cancellation this weekend, but you have that protection.
I mean, famous last words. Now you've jinxed it.
They
Here comes the asteroid.
Yeah, they have all-in pricing. Toggling this feature shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. image of seat views. I know Citizens Bank Park, but maybe there will be good seats that I'm not familiar with that I can look it up on here. And the lowest price guarantee, because War Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference, because I promise you if I go this weekend, it's going to be with the lowest price guarantee. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code PHLY for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code PHLY for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. That is a nice shirt, but I'm sorry. Wait, let's pause.
Let's not talk fashion. We
Okay.
We don't want to get way later. We don't want to do it. We don't want to do it.
Sorry.
We don't want to do it.
But I'd like to share.
We don't want to do it.
Okay.
You just pinched me.
It's a nice material.
Can I ask you a process question?
Anything, yeah. About the Sixers?
No.
That was a process joke.
You're very funny. How did you go about like the writing process? You've got were you doing one essay a day? Like what was how did you lay it all out? What was the process like for you? Did you figure out who you were going to write about first and then get to writing? Like give me the laydown.
Yeah. And you can attest to this. I was not the best version of myself last summer. I was
a lot going on.
Yeah, I was I was writing this book, and I had a very confined period of time. I was teaching for the first time. Okay. And then
forgot about the teaching.
And then I had a few, we were supposed to be on at our previous job. I had 2 A1s I was working on. You remember that? And so just because I wanted the opportunity to write that. So Emily can tell you, I was not the best version of myself. So the answer to your question is painstakingly wrote this. What I did was I am real good about, I have a spreadsheet, and it wasn't done. I wasn't writing it by chapters. I was writing it by words. So I had to finish X amount of words per day. And I set a schedule out to write 1,500 words this day, 1,000 words this day, 2,500 words this day, 1,000 words that day. And then I would try to give myself Saturday and Sunday to be with the kids. The kids were at summer camp during the day. And so I would do that, and we were still doing our shows. So I was trying to adhere to that.
Poor guy.
And then, what I tried to do too is to make sure that I hit my words each day. I wrote what I knew. So if there was a day when I'm waiting on phone calls, I'm like, all right, I'm going to write Carson Wentz today, right? Because I have Carson Wentz. I'm going to write this Carson Wentz chapter. And so that would kind of be my fallback approach. But it was the first book I wrote was the writing process was more invigorating. I got to say, this one, the writing process wasn't as invigorating, just because there was so much other stuff going on. But it was rewarding at the end, because when I read through it, I would go back and read, and I was like, "Oh, okay, I like this. I like the way this came together." Or this.
I was going to say you got to sell this a little bit more to the people.
Yeah,
well, that's good.
Yeah, this and I used this analogy before on the show. I've never run a marathon. You can probably tell, but I imagine those who run a marathon. I always imagine this. When you're on mile 11, what do you think, right? And that's kind of how I felt. But then when you get to mile 25, and you're like, oh man, look what I've done, right? And that's kind of what it was. I remember when I got to like 73,000 words, and I still had more to go. But I'm like, this. I feel good about how this is coming together, and I felt really good about clicking send. But the process was. Sorry.
Got a bug on here.
Okay. I would write in a coffee shop sometimes.
Okay. Same one or mix it up?
I mixed it up 3 different coffee shops. If I needed to get out of the house, I had a home office that I wrote at night. So when the kids would go to sleep, and my kids went to bed at like 7:30, and I would write from like 7:30 to 1:30, and I would have the MLB baseball games
and
on.
we know how you are at one in the morning.
All the errors were at 1:30. If the editor picked those errors up, they were then. And then on weekends, I would go down the shore, and I would write down the shore when the kids, like before the kids got up.
You think you were better at one of the 3 coffee shops than the others?
Yeah, I do. I do. Green Engine. In Ardmore, I was I wrote some good stuff there. I actually wrote a good I wrote the Joe Banner stuff at a coffee shop in Princeton. I was going to Julia's friend and my friend Sean Greaves' house in Princeton. And
wow, you didn't even reach out to Coach Flynn, huh? He's going to be
well,
furious.
I had to write. And I got there early and I went to a coffee shop, and I remember I was really on a roll there. Like, I was excited to see Sean. But I was like, man, I'm feeling good about the writing. I could keep going for 2 hours here.
Tell us about how the Malcolm Jenkins forward came to pass.
Well, there's a few things there. First off, I had to think of who could write this forward, and I wanted to be someone who had good perspective. Number one, okay. I didn't want to just be a name on the book. I wanted to be someone who would have good perspective. Last August, I remember was the day I went to the Baltimore Ravens game. I got the Baltimore Ravens preseason game. Okay?
Yes, the classic commando game.
Commando game. Oh, yes. Yeah. Well, yeah. Yes. You're boxers. Yes. That's right. The classic commando game. Before I went, I received in the mail that day the proofs for Malcolm Jenkins' book. And I remember really being impressed with how well he wrote it. Number one, how thoughtful it was, how he was vulnerable in it, and so I admired him as a writer. And I've said this, and I wrote this in the acknowledgments of the book, that you can't have favorites in this job, but there's no one I've covered who I respect more than Malcolm. So I reached out and I asked him, and I truly, truly, truly appreciate him saying yes, and I'm proud of this forward. I'm proud that his name's on the book because, he was a captain of the Super Bowl team. I think he has a very rich story. He chose to come to Philly. Philly's meaningful to him. He still has a place here. He still does. I was at a charity event recently in Camden, and I've told this story before. I don't think I've told this on the show. I would go to Malcolm Jenkins' football camp every Memorial Day weekend because I went up there when Malcolm signed. I went to Piscataway to do a story on Malcolm. I got to know him and his family, Mona Terrell from his foundation, and the mayor of Piscataway, his coaches, and so I got invited to go up to cover his football camp, and I did it, and I would go up subsequently, and then one year, 2016, I couldn't go up. Because it was Memorial Day weekend is when it would happen. I was getting married that weekend, and I think our rehearsal dinner was the night of the camp, and Emily didn't let me miss or be late for the rehearsal dinner to go to Malcolm Jenkins' football camp.
Yes, I think it is that level of absolute derangement that is poured into this book.
But anyway, so the answer to your question,
insane.
The answer to your question is I respect Malcolm, and I thought he would have good perspective, and that's why I chose, and I appreciate him saying yes.
Can I tell you my only issue with the book?
Only would indicate there's one. I mean, you're more to have more than one. I have more than one issue with the book, but yeah, you're more.
My only issue is the sentence. There's a line you referenced Tom Brady as, without equivocation, just the best quarterback in NFL history.
Okay, all right.
Is that fact?
Yeah, let that be your objection. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I stand by that. Best quarterback in NFL history.
Yeah, of course you do.
Yeah. Although I do love Peyton Manning as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
With Howie,
yes.
To circle back on Howie, the thing that you have talked about for a lot, which I think talked about recently, is, and it's in the chapter, is the framing of Howie, his strength being building up the roster and not maintenance. How much do you think that is at play at the moment?
Oh, very much so. Now, I think this. I think Howie has learned from that. I don't think he's necessarily making short-term moves there. I don't think that he signed Bryce Huff to put them over the edge right now. I think that was done thinking a few years down the line and kind of always be building it. But I think that you have a more objective view of your own roster in the rebuilding times than in.
That's a good point.
So I think when he's had his best years, I think it's like, man, he has no attachment to the guys who are there, or he really feels like this needs to be upgraded. And I think that in times in the maintenance stage, it's not just those, from my perspective in evaluating Howie, it's not just those short-term moves that you're doing this to put you over the edge, but it's also like a belief in the guys that you've brought in, that you've signed, that they're either going to continue at that level or that they're going to play at that level. Like in 2016 and 2017, he didn't have those draft picks that he was attached to. Matter of fact, the draft picks he was attached to were the guys from like a few years earlier, Ertz and Lane and Vinny Curry, our friend Vinny Curry. And I think you see that now, like even with like relying on some of these guys that he drafted, there's like a belief in you are viewing it through the spectrum of like, we believe in this guy. And I think that's part of the maintenance stage, is that who you're turning it over to are guys you're invested in.
I have 2 more questions for you as we close.
This is so much fun
on the hour mark. You mentioned your grandfather,
yes.
the dedication.
Yeah.
Why?
You're gonna get me emotional. I have such sincere respect for my grandfather. He's the man. Like I mean, I know it's very generic, but he's a great man who's been a formative figure in my life, and specifically mentioning him here because like he's the one who taught me football. Basically, like I learned math. My grandfather's great with numbers, but I was, no joke, like a 4 and 5 year old in the backseat of the car, and he would say 3 touchdowns, a field goal, and a safety. Right? How much? And that's how I learned math that way. Mm-hmm. And then point spreads. Like
what a great story.
Yeah. It was probably 5 or 6, come to think. But I remember distinctly sitting there with him, and he would just do that. And point spreads. Everything was like, it wasn't the Eagles won 27-24. It was, did they cover 3.5, right? Or that kind of thing. So and then you
gotta get him on Bet365.
Yeah. He's read, when I was younger, read all my stuff. Was a tough editor, like my high school papers. He would edit my high school papers. And he was, and he's just been, he's been a big advocate for me. He's been, he's believed in me and in a lot of different transitions in my life. And so, yeah, he was a very, my first book I dedicated to my father. But this one, I was trying to think, like I was going to do a dedication to like all Eagles fans or that kind of thing. But I wanted to make it personal, and my grandfather, it's very meaningful to me.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
You've done a few book events now. Mm-hmm. Is there a question that you have been hoping to get asked that has not been asked yet?
Well, this is a fun interview. I'm really enjoying this. And I said, this is no fault of anyone. Like you read the book, which I appreciate, because you can have a more sophisticated conversation about it. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty hard on myself. Like the stuff that I would have left out, or stuff that I left out.
You want to drag yourself through the mud. You want to be asked about.
Yeah, because I think
that's crazy.
No, because I think Asante Samuel, Troy, and Trent Cole, John Runyon, Trey Thomas, Troy Vincent, Bobby Taylor. They deserve recognition here. If I'm having a book,
but you can't write about everybody.
Yeah, but I wanted to mention that. I really think like seeing where the organization is now, you can see a lot of how it started. Their core philosophies, how they were put in place with Andy and Joe Banner and Jeffrey Lurie 25 years ago. But also in my epilogue, I wrote it when Julia, Bo, Jamie, we were at the Brian Dawkins golf tournament.
Yes.
And I came back, and I thought it was like really poignant, the life cycle in the NFL, in that that day. So we're at this golf tournament, and you have Javon Curse is there. You have Brian Westbrook there. You have Jeremiah Trotter there. Obviously Brian Dawkins. You go on down the list.
Kelce as well. But
yeah, Jason. Yeah. And then literally on that day, on the transaction log, Jason Kelce and Fletcher Cox officially retired. That day, the Eagles had minicamp. Cam Jurgens took over. He's in Jason Kelce's locker. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. or I'm sorry, they had OTAs. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is on the field, and you see this life cycle. Like Fletcher Cox always said he's only running space. And that was like really reinforced that day. And what endures, honestly, is the fans, are the fans. Like, they are the enduring thread here. There's going to be a day when Julian Lurie runs the team, not Jeffrey Lurie, right? There's going to be a lot, I'm curious to see what the next 25 years holds. Jeffrey Lurie talked about the use of AI and things like that. But the point is this: is like
bet the under.
What endures are the fans, and that was really reinforced to me that day more than anything, because you saw this life cycle of a franchise.
Well, you can become a diehard, and if you're a diehard, you can also get tickets and hear a little bit more about this book with Zach next Monday night. Go to allphly.com and check that out. We have a super chat from CDP who says, Trevor Lawrence publicly defended Doug Pederson today. Is that allowed?
Well, they have their moments, so no, they have more than their moments, I guess.
Apparently,
yeah, they have their
Okay. Anything else? I think I've covered my big question.
I so appreciate this. This means a lot. That you were willing to do this, that you were
of course
to devote a show to this. I have a lot of audience members who've reached out, and I have a shipment that I'm sending out tomorrow of personalized books. That now this is the thing, I need to get more copies in, okay? And so these are going to go out. Some are going to go out tomorrow. Some are going to go out next week. But if you want a personalized copy, you can send me a DM on Twitter at zberm, Instagram z_Berman, or email me at zach@allphly.com. I know I had mentioned the website part of it, but I created a website, but then it wasn't gonna be like an e-commerce thing, right? So you were just gonna email me anyways, because I need to know how you want it personalized and that kind of thing, and so this is the most direct way to do it.
Okay. Here it is. The franchise. Philadelphia Eagles, a curated history of the birds. Get it wherever books are sold. Reach out to Zach and get your signed copy. Fantastic. Thank you for doing this, Zach.
Thank you for doing it. This means a lot.
Of course. Now, you and I, we're done for the week. It's the bye week. I know you're going to be working.
Yeah.
But tomorrow, it's going to be Roy and Handsome Rich at 2 o'clock. And then on Friday, Fran and Rich to take you through whatever else is going on with the Eagles. I don't know. Are you expecting any news for the rest of this week?
I'm not. I made the joke.
You're hoping not.
A Devin White cut could be that Friday afternoon, or like when the Phillies have their first pitch of the playoff game, you're sneaking in there. But no, I am not expecting news this weekend. I have a feature that I'm going to run on Monday or Tuesday of next week. I have a thoughts column that's up today, and I might sneak one more thing in the end of this week. But make sure you check out.
Sneaky.
Fran has 2 pieces up. Les has a piece up. So make sure you check out our Eagles coverage on allphly.com.
All right. Well, let's close it out as the chat is doing as we celebrate our boy, Zach. Thank you to everybody for watching and listening. We will talk to you tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Thanks to Julia. And as always, we love you.
We all silly like the mayor.